Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The motion before the House is very simple. This is a plea for answers, a plea for clarity and a plea for the truth. And the choice that the House makes today is simple too. Our demand is clear. End the cover-up and begin the clean-up. We already know that the so-called VIP lane for PPE enabled the shameful waste of taxpayers' money and inexcusable profiteering by unfit and unqualified providers. We know that the government has already written off £10 billion of public funds spent on their personal protective equipment that was either unusable, overpriced or undelivered. Ministers have admitted that they are still paying £770,000 a day of taxpayers' cash to store gloves, goggles and gowns, enough to pay for 75,000 spaces in after-school clubs or 19,000 in full-time nursery care. £106,000 of that money is sent to China every day alone to pay for the storage costs. We already know that £4 billion worth of unusable PPE has been burnt to generate power after 70 million PPE items were sold off for just £400,000. What we don't yet know, Madam Deputy Speaker, is what was said in correspondence between the key participants of the benches opposite and the unqualified cronies on the make and on the take. We don't even know exactly where our money ended up. But we do know that if ministers get their way, this system could be used again, and this scandal repeated, enriching fraudsters at the expense of the taxpayer and creating a new mountain of waste.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. She's absolutely right that there is a scandalous waste of public money here. But equally important is that we know that our care sector and health sector was desperate for PPE during the pandemic. Specialised Canvas in my constituency actually changed all of their manufacturing to be able to make PPE and got a large number of contracts from individual trusts, but they were completely unable to get any contracts out of the Department of Health. So alongside the public money wastage, there was also the fact that we had nurses and carers unable to access PPE when they desperately needed it at the height of the pandemic.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. There's 2 points that are made there, which I will come on to in my speech in greater detail. But one was the lack of PPE for those on the front line, and also the total disrespect in the way in which these contracts through the VIP lane was handed out at the expense of businesses up and down the UK who had experience, who could have helped during the pandemic, who were not party to WhatsApps or whatever else that got them to ministers' access to the VIP lane. Take the mystery of a PPE company with links to a Tory politician. While it is for the authorities to decide whether any law is broken, and I won't be commenting on the ongoing investigations, we do know that PPE Medpro was referred to the VIP lane by a sitting member of the Cabinet after lobbying from another Tory politician 5 days before it was even legally registered as a company. The House may recall that this particular company was subsequently awarded 2 contracts worth £203 billion to supply PPE, £81 million to supply 210 million face masks was awarded on May 2020. And a £122 million contract to supply 25 million surgical gowns was awarded in June 2020. Madam Deputy Speaker, the face masks bought by this government from Medpro for more than twice the price as identical items from other suppliers. And the surgical gowns rejected for use in the NHS after a technical inspection. All of them never even used. It points to a total failure of due diligence and the rotten stench of cronyism.
I thank my Right Honourable Friend for giving way. During the early months of the pandemic, I was being contacted by PPE suppliers known to the NHS, long-term suppliers, who told me that they were being rejected as they were offering help. One of them wrote to me and he said, pre-April 2020, there was a degree of total incompetence about the government handling of PPE purchases. However, by the way they scrutinised our own offers thereafter, we believe they knew, at least specification-wise, exactly what they were doing, and that senior managers were taking steps to use preferred suppliers, even though they were aware these suppliers had neither the track record nor the level of competence to produce compliant goods. What does my right honourable friend think about that?
I think it absolutely stinks, and I think actually my honourable friend is absolutely right in that the public can see through this, and those businesses that are pretty angry because they wanted to do the right thing during the pandemic. They knew it was a situation that Britain faced that they'd not faced before as a global pandemic, and they wanted to do their bit. And the frustration, and my right honourable friend who's right to quote her business, is that there is no question that the specifications should have been known, and therefore why was all this PPE bought knowing full well it couldn't be used?
Thank you.
I'm very grateful to my old friend for giving way. Does she agree with me that the mood in her constituents, as in mine, opposite these dealings, is one of faith being completely shaken in the good governance and process of this nation, and that people at the very least are saying that the monies that have been obtained and goods not properly utilised has to be returned, and if the circumstances so dictate, there should be criminal prosecutions long before an inquiry can progress. Thank you.
I think my honourable friend is right to capture the mood of the public on this, because at a time where the public are told that we have to show restraint, at a time where the public can see the finances, not least because of this government's former Prime Minister and Chancellor and the crashing of the economy, but it absolutely galls them to think that ministers opposite were not doing the due diligence that was required with the funds that we needed, and now we have this situation where we are spending billions of pounds on wasted PPE, and we've also got thousands of pounds every single day that is being wasted on storage for PPE. I'll happily give way.
But obviously, in government, you have to actually get on and make decisions, and we don't often get to see what the Labour Party would do in our place. On this occasion, we did have an insight because, of course, the Labour Party did recommend a whole series of people that could supply vital things for us during the pandemic, vital supplies, including a football agent supplying ventilators. What assessment have you made of the quality and credibility has the chair made of the Labour Party's own suggestions for supplies during the pandemic?
I will in a sec. I thank the honourable member for his comments, but I asked the honourable member how many members from across the House that were not Conservative members got VIP access to the VIP lanes. I can give the honourable member the answer: none, zilch, zero. And this is the problem, because the due diligence wasn't done on those contracts, and it was his government's problem, his government's responsibility, and his government's failure. I'll happily give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and she's making an excellent speech. Would she agree with me that there's a huge contrast between the comments of the National Audit Office on the way that the Welsh Government procured the PPE, where they were not wasting public money, where they were getting value for money, and they were not ending up having to explain to the House how they gave contracts to various people? And would you not agree with me that that is the way that a Labour government in action really works?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and this was a global pandemic, and yet we see it is the UK government that is constantly criticised about these contracts and the way in which they were doled out and given. And all this motion to the House today is asking for is transparency. What have you got to hide? I'll happily give way.
Thank the Shadow Minister, or Shadow Secretary of State, for giving way. She's making a very powerful speech. Today has been a really important day because we've met fire brigades unions from across the country who have come down to stand up for a decent salary. That's all we're asking for. And what this debate illustrates, is that the government can find billions of pounds to hand over in a crisis to well-connected supporters. And if the allegations are true of the member for the other place, enough money from that alleged dividend would have settled the firefighters' settlement in Scotland in totality. One person against every firefighter. Will she confirm that a Labour government, an incoming Labour government, will investigate this matter thoroughly and transparently and hold anyone who has bent the rules, however they have done so, will be held to justice?
Angela Rayner.
I thank the honourable member for his point, and he's absolutely right. And the FBU members, Fire Brigade Union members, were in Parliament today and outside, and they are frustrated, like many others who are being told that there isn't money to give them a pay rise, and that actually they're going to get a real terms pay cut. But at the same time, billions of pounds has been wasted, and as I said in my opening remarks, is that £770,000 a day on storing this equipment. It is not acceptable to most people and most members of the public. I'll happily give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend on the front bench giving way. She's highlighted one particular legal situation, but I'm sure she's aware that the Department for Health and Social Care remains in dispute on 176 contracts for PPE worth £2.7 billion. And I wondered if she had any thoughts about that.
My honourable friend, the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, is absolutely right. It is absolutely eye-watering, astonishing that 176 contracts remain in this situation. And the public can see that. The public can see this, and they are frustrated because it is not acceptable. It is not okay to govern in that way, and the public rightly want answers, and they want them now. Now, the links between Medpro company and the Tory peer in question were never publicly disclosed. In fact, they were denied repeatedly by the lawyers acting for those involved. We now know that the money ended up in offshore accounts directly linked to those individuals. By their own admission, this was for so-called tax efficiency. It seems they even dodged paying their own taxes on the profits they made from ours. Only after a long legal battle was it revealed that there was active lobbying from ministerial colleagues for access to the VIP lane, and substantial contracts were won by those companies. They said that the peer in question did not benefit from these contracts, a denial that has been rather undermined by the latest revelations of The Guardian rather than any disclosure of ministers. Because it was only some time after The Guardian exposed these links that a minister finally told me, in answer to a parliamentary question, that, and I quote, "Departmental records reflect that a link between Baroness Mone and PPE Medpro was clear prior to contracts being awarded." But ministers have for months refused to show us those records or tell us the nature of that link and whether it was declared or whether it was discovered in due diligence. This was the subject of an investigation by the Standards Commissioners in the other place, and yet it appears ministers sat on the information they had. So the question is very simple, Madam Deputy Speaker. What have ministers opposite got to hide? Did they know all along who was behind the PPE Medpro? Or was due diligence so poor that they did not realise the problem? If they had nothing to hide and no rules or laws were broken, then ministers will surely be happy to make the details of the meetings and the correspondence available. And while they're at it, will the Minister give us clarity about allegations made by the former Health Secretary in his new book about a separate bid for business connected to Baroness Mone? Not Mone.
The Right Honourable Lady is venturing rather too far into the territory that I urged her to avoid. I'm afraid that these are the rules, so I do have to bring her up if she is, to pull her up if she is actively criticising a member of the other place. I'm sorry about that, but that is the rule. Angela Rayner.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I wasn't criticising members from the other place. I'm just quoting what a member from this place, who was a health minister at the time, has said. And I'm asking the Minister today if he can give us clarity on what was said, because that's now public record. So that's all I'm asking the Minister for. I haven't said that about any person from the other place. That is what a Minister has said in his diary. So it would be nice if the Minister opposite can give us some light on this whole murky affair. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let's turn to the numbers, because as they say, the numbers don't lie. 10. How many times a company was more likely to get a contract if it was in the VIP lane? 1 in 5. The proportion of emergency contracts handed out by the government that have been flagged for corruption. 3.5 billion. That's the value in pounds of contracts given to the Tory party's mates that we know of. 3 billion. The value in pounds of contracts awarded that warrant further investigation. None, zilch, zero. That's the number of times this government has come clean on this dodgy Medpro scandal. A cover-up, a whitewash, events swept under the carpet, and now they've been dragged kicking and screaming to the House today to give an honest account about their shameful dealings. The public are sick of being ripped off and being taken for fools, and they want to know the truth. So today, I will give way.
Is it not clear to the public now that the party opposite believe in one thing only, and that is how much money they can grab from the public purse and give to their crony friends and steal from the hard-working pockets of people in this country?
I think my honourable friend captures the mood of the public. They want answers. The public want answers. They want to know what's happened at the time when they needed this government the most to act responsibly, what's happened to their money and what happened with these contracts. So today we've tabled this motion and we will put it to a vote. Let me be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we're not asking the government to do anything that would undermine any chance of recovering our money or that would conflict with any police investigation. But for 10 months they have told us that they are in mediation. What progress has been made? When will they conclude it has failed and take action now? Can they actually get our money back? Or are they just kicking the can down the road? So our motion asks ministers to hand over the record to the Public Accounts Committee, a body this House relies on to hold them to account for public spending. Because the only logical conclusion is that they do indeed have something to hide. The public deserve answers on whether the dodgy lobbying at the heart of this scandal played a part in how vast sums of taxpayers' cash has been wasted, and whether shameful profiteering has been enabled by this government. Which leads me to the second simple question for the House today. Will members opposite, well, the few that are in, will members opposite now vote for a clean-up or yet another cover-up? Just last week, the government-led Tory members in the other place through the lobbies to block an amendment to their procurement bill. It would have banned VIP lanes in future procurement decisions. But they voted it down. They voted to protect unlawful VIP access instead of protecting taxpayers' money. The Prime Minister is peddling legislation full of loopholes that would give Tory ministers free rein to do it all over again. Fresh from writing off billions he carelessly cost to COVID fraud, the question for the House is whether to act to prevent a repeat. So today, I say to honourable and right honourable members opposite, learn your lesson. Don't let this shameful episode be repeated. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the loss and trauma of the pandemic was immense. Millions of families lost loved ones, some only getting to say goodbye via iPad as mothers, fathers, husbands, wives and friends slipped away. And then we learn that throughout this trauma, companies with WhatsApp links to ministers were given special VIP access to contracts which have seen billions poured down the drain. This government has done untold damage to the public's faith in politics. The first step in restoring this trust is publishing these documents today. The public need answers about how this happened, and they need them now, Madam Deputy Speaker. But they also deserve reassurances that this will never, ever be allowed to happen again. Taxpayers' money must be treated with respect, not handed out in backroom deals to cronies or a passport to profiteering. And PPE Medpro is just the tip of the iceberg in this scandal. We now know that companies that got into the VIP lane were 10 times more likely to win a contract. We now know that many did not go through the so-called 8-stage process of due diligence, as ministers have now admitted. And we now know that this left dozens of experienced British businesses out in the cold. Businesses who had the expertise to procure PPE and ventilators precisely and fast. Businesses who offered their help in our darkest hour. And businesses whose only mistake was to play by the rules. Not a single one of the companies referred to the VIP lane was done so by a politician of any other political party other than the Conservative Party. The then Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, the Cabinet member who oversaw the entire emergency procurement programme, reportedly fast-tracked a bid from one of his own personal friends and donors, who went on to win hundreds of millions of pounds of public money. Last week, he said that he simply referred the bid from PPE Medpro on to officials. Yet we also know that he passed it directly on to his ministerial colleague, Lord Agnew. I'll happily give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and she's given a very thoughtful speech that should put everybody on the opposite benches to shame. Exactly. Was my honourable friend as shocked as I was to find out that there was a company that was put on the VIP lane by mistake, and they still got £1 million contracts?
Gosh. Wow.
It is absolute negligence of due diligence when the whole process, which we now know has been tested in the High Court around this VIP access lane and what that did and what it didn't do. But we know that there is serious concerns from members of the public, and that's what this motion is about today. It's about getting to the bottom of it, and I think the public deserve no less than that. But after the Minister passed it directly on to his ministerial colleague, Lord Agnew, and sometime later, officials discussed that the Minister's office was still being furiously lobbied. The former Health Secretary has also described being lobbied in words I won't quote in the chamber, Madam Deputy Speaker has made it clear, but without any dates or details. So we do not know exactly what conversations or contracts happened behind the scenes. But we do know that £3.5 billion of contracts that have been handed out by this government to their political donors, ministers, mates. And so, yes, we do need an investigation into that too. In fact, we need an investigation into every pound and penny that has been handed out, and to learn the lessons so the public money isn't wasted again. And don't forget, they had previously denied the existence of a VIP lane at all. Well, it existed all right. It allowed Conservative politicians to open doors for anyone with connections to ministers. The WhatsApp Highway Express. And earlier this year, the High Court declared it unlawful. But as my right honourable friend mentioned earlier, it didn't have to be this way. Governments across the world responded to the COVID emergency without wasting billions of pounds of taxpayers' money and relying on dodgy backroom deals. According to the watchdog, the Welsh Labour government managed to prevent health and care bodies running out of PPE. The watchdog said, and I quote, "In contrast to the position described by the National Audit Office in England, we saw no evidence of a priority being given to potential suppliers depending on who referred them." The Welsh Labour government created an open, transparent PPE supply chain, in stark contrast to the approach the Conservatives took in England.
Thank my right honourable friend from giving way, making a powerful speech. Does she agree with me that, with the benefit of hindsight, this House would not have allowed the government to have the emergency procurement powers that it granted at the beginning of the pandemic if we'd have known how they were going to be used in this corrupt way?
Not used, abused.
I think my honourable friend's absolutely right, and I'd go further in terms of the correspondence that I've been receiving is that the public feel that, and many Conservative voters are absolutely shocked by what they've seen this Conservative government do. They don't believe it speaks to their values, and yet this has happened, and yet we have a procurement bill going forward where this could happen again. So for today at least, the question before the House is simple. Clean up or cover up? I know that members across this House care about our democracy. Although we disagree on many things, I hope we agree on the importance of trust in politics, the values of integrity, professionalism and accountability in public office, the public's wish for more transparency and accountability within these four walls. Put simply, a vote for this motion is a vote in favour of the truth. This government has presided over scandal after scandal that has engulfed their party. They appear to have benefited from dodgy lobbying left, right and centre. And voting today for yet another cover-up will send another very clear message to the public that this Prime Minister cares more about protecting vested interests than putting things right. That his own promise of integrity, professionalism and accountability is just more hot air. After what they've put the British people through, this surely cannot be the message members opposite want to send. Now, Labour has a plan to turn this procurement racket on its head and tackle the obscene waste with an Office for Value for Money to ensure that public money is spent with the respect that it deserves. It's about time members opposite got with that programme. So I say today, and I hope the benches opposite are listening, let's end the cover-up and begin the clean-up and start it now. And I commend this motion to the House.